There's a deep blue pond in the New Mexico desert, and at the bottom a metal grate blocks a hole in the rock. That grate isn't decoration. It's a warning. Welcome to Scary Stories Files. If you enjoy real-life horror, true survival stories, and disasters that feel impossible to escape, please like this video, share it, leave a comment, and subscribe to Scary Stories Files. Serious claustrophobia warning for this one. Viewer discretion is advised. 100 miles east of Albuquerque sits the small town of Santa Rosa. On the edge of town is a place locals know well, a swimming spot that looks harmless at first glance. From the surface, it's just water. Calm, clear, inviting. But the moment you look closer, you notice something that doesn't belong in the desert: the color. The water is a deep, unreal blue, like the sky dropped into the ground. And it's so clear you can see far below the surface, deeper than a normal pond should allow. That's because it isn't a pond. It's a natural spring, an artesian well fed by pressurized water rising from deep underground. The water flows constantly, thousands of gallons every minute. Cold, clean, and steady, around 62 degrees year-round. It never warms up. It never stops. The entire pool refreshes again and again like a living machine. Over time, it became a landmark. Travelers relied on it. Locals cooled off in it. Divers came to train in it because from the top it feels controlled. No waves, no current, perfect visibility. A giant blue classroom for scuba students. But the blue hole has a second identity, a hidden one, because springs don't just appear out of nowhere. Water has to come from somewhere. And underground, water doesn't always travel through neat pipes. It carves, it erodes, it finds cracks in soft rock and turns them into tunnels. Sometimes those tunnels open into corridors and chambers. Sometimes they tighten into squeezes barely wider than a person's shoulders, and you can't tell what exists down there until you enter. At about 80 feet deep, the bottom of the blue hole widens. There are rocks, debris, old objects that fell in over time, and on one side near the floor there's an opening, not big, just large enough for a diver to slip through. Today, that opening is covered by a heavy metal grate, but it wasn't always. And if you're wondering why a city would ever install a grate underwater, here's the reason. In the 1970s, groups of students came to the Blue Hole for training dives. It was famous for being safe, and that's what made it dangerous, because safe places create false confidence. One spring morning, a small group arrived with scuba gear and cameras. They planned to practice underwater photography, simple dives, controlled conditions. Before anyone entered the water, the rules were clear. Do not stay deep too long, and under no circumstances enter the cave. Most students listened. Two didn't. They descended with the others, enjoying the clarity and the calm. Then curiosity pulled them toward the bottom, toward the side opening. At first it looked harmless. A hole in the rock, 4 feet wide, a doorway into darkness. They hovered there, shining their lights into the entrance. And the warning they had been given started to feel like a challenge instead of protection. So they signaled to each other and slipped inside. The moment they passed the threshold, the environment changed. The water wasn't the same bright blue anymore. The walls were jagged, the floor was sandy, the space tightened. The cave dropped downward like a chute, a vertical descent, then a slanted corridor that split into branching areas. To an untrained diver, it still didn't look like a trap. It looked like an adventure. But cave diving has one unforgiving rule: if you lose the way out, you die. And the most common way divers lose the way out is silt. Fine sand and debris sits undisturbed for years. All it takes is one careless fin kick to lift it into the water. A few more kicks and visibility collapses, not slowly. Instantly, it becomes a snowstorm underwater. Divers don't always notice at first because they're looking ahead. The cloud forms behind them, and by the time they turn around, the exit is gone. That's what happened. As the two students moved deeper, they stirred up the bottom without realizing it. Silt rose like smoke, thickening in the tunnel behind them. When they turned back, the doorway they entered through wasn't a doorway anymore. It was just darkness and swirling haze. Now imagine the psychology of that moment. You know you did something you were told not to do. You know you're underground. You know you're enclosed. And suddenly you cannot see the way out. Panic doesn't arrive like a scream. It arrives like a physical sensation. A cold drop in your stomach, a tightening in your chest, your breathing speeds up. Your brain starts doing math you don't want to do. How much air do I have left? And the cruel part is panic burns air faster. The more scared you are, the faster your tank empties. And the faster your tank empties, the more scared you become. A perfect loop. At the surface, time passed. Other students finished their dives. The instructor checked heads. Two were missing. A search began. Rescue divers went down with a line, because trained cave divers do not enter without a guideline, a physical cord that leads back to open water even if everything turns black. They reached the entrance and pushed in carefully, laying the line behind them. Inside, the cave was already clouded, and in tight spaces, rescue is not a heroic sprint. It's slow, one person at a time, one mistake at a time. They found one student first, deeper inside, near a side chamber, but the second was nowhere. The cave system spread out in branching rooms and offshoots, small crevices, tight angles. And the deeper the search went, the more dangerous it became for the rescuers too, because cave hazards aren't just silt, ceilings shift, rocks loosen. And in an underwater cave, bubbles from divers can dislodge debris. During the search, stones fell from the ceiling. One diver was struck. Another was nearly crushed by a heavy rock brushing past in the darkness. The cave was warning them too. After days of attempts, conditions worsened. Visibility dropped. The water became unstable and cloudy, and the search was called off for safety. Then the city made a decision. A heavy metal grate was installed over the entrance, not to keep the cave safe, to keep people out. Because some places are not meant for casual curiosity, and some doors should never be opened. For years, the grate remained silent and permanent. The Blue Hole continued to be a famous training site. Tourists swam. Students practiced. Most never thought about what lay behind that grid of metal. But decades later, a new effort began. A specialized team, experienced cave divers, approached the city with a plan to explore and map the cavern system. Not recreational divers, not students, professionals who understood the rules. They received permission. The first step was removing the grate. When they did, they discovered something disturbing. The entrance had been intentionally buried under piles of rock and debris, as if someone wanted to make sure nobody could ever squeeze through again. It took serious work to clear the opening. Even then, progress was slow, because inside the cave was not a smooth tunnel. It was a maze of boulders, huge rocks stacked like unstable furniture, some as large as cars, and the only route forward was through gaps and cracks between them. That's the nightmare of this cave. Not just tight spaces, but tight spaces made of unstable stone. A place where a single wrong movement could shift a boulder, trap a diver, or crush the only exit route. Still, the team advanced carefully. They ran fixed guideline systems. They mapped passage by passage. They moved slowly because in cave diving, speed is arrogance. The deepest section they reached was far beyond the open water of the blue hole. But even at those depths, the cave didn't open into a grand cathedral. It narrowed, more restrictions, more squeezes, more rock, and on one of the final dives, everything went wrong. Two divers entered together, heading toward a tight restriction where the plan was simple. One diver would wait while the other pushed forward briefly to retrieve and remove a guideline from the deepest mapped area. It was controlled, planned, safe on paper. The lead diver signaled for the second to stay. Then he squeezed through, disappearing into the boulder maze. Inside that section, movement is like crawling through a wrecked building underwater. You pull with your hands. You twist sideways, you try not to disturb the sand, even being careful, silt rises. And once the tunnel is clouded, you can't rely on vision. You rely on the line. The lead diver reached the end of the line, then made a mistake that seemed harmless in the moment. He decided he wanted to film the final section. So he turned back to retrieve the camera. But when he returned, the passage was silted out. Not surprising. What was surprising was the second diver. He wasn't supposed to be there. Against the plan he had followed, curiosity, confidence, impatience. Whatever the reason, he squeezed through multiple tight restrictions and ended up stuck. And in a cave, stuck doesn't mean waiting. It means terror. The lead diver encountered him in the haze. The second diver was panicking, breathing hard, fighting the rock instead of working with it. The lead diver tried to signal him to turn back, but the space was too tight. The second diver couldn't turn, not without help. So the lead diver grabbed him and started pulling him backward through restrictions, an incredibly difficult task in a narrow, rock-filled corridor. He had to drag him inch by inch carefully without snapping gear or injuring him. They moved, and for a moment it worked. Then the guideline, their lifeline, was yanked out of the lead diver's hand. In a silt-out, losing the line is like losing the surface. The lead diver froze, not physically, mentally, because panic is contagious. Even experts feel it. But training is what happens next. He forced himself to stop, slow his breathing. Remember, you have time, you have gas. The cave wants you to rush, don't. He searched by feel, rock, sand, boulders, finally line, relief. He followed it again, moving through the maze. Then an arm reached through a gap. The second diver, still panicking, still stuck, the lead diver pulled him toward a larger opening to free him. But panic makes people move in the worst way possible. The second diver thrashed forward, wedging himself awkwardly in a narrow section. Now both divers were jammed, face to feet in a tight tunnel, unable to move cleanly. Fins kicked, valves struck rock, equipment scraped, a suit was damaged, cold water flooded in. The lead diver had to protect his face from frantic kicks while trying to create room. Finally, with careful leverage, he gave the other diver enough space to slip free. The second diver surged forward, but the movement forced the lead diver into another opening, separating them. In the chaos, the lead diver lost a fin. He paused, controlled his breathing again, and searched. By pure luck, he found the fin nearby and secured it. Then he followed the line once more, pushing toward clearer water. For a moment, visibility improved enough to see the guideline, and he could feel movement, meaning the other diver was still alive somewhere. Instinct screamed, "Go help." So he turned back. He followed the line into the silt and the boulder restrictions again, and then the line went slack. In that world, slack line is a terrible message. It means no movement, no pull, no life. The lead diver pushed forward and found the second diver motionless. The cave had taken him. The lead diver had to do the hardest thing a rescuer can do in an environment like that: leave, not because he didn't care. Because survival math is brutal. He had decompression to complete. His suit was compromised. If he stayed, he could die too. He returned to the entrance, communicated what happened, and endured a long, cold decompression, knowing exactly what was waiting behind him. Later, the team recovered the body. The footage told the story of the decision to follow, the panic, and the deadly chain reaction that happened in a cave where mistakes compound instantly. After the investigation and the mapping work, one conclusion became undeniable. This cave was not a future dive attraction. It was a trap made of rock, a place where even professionals could get caught by a single choice. So the city sealed it again. A new grate was installed, heavier, stronger, permanent, and that's where it remains today. The blue hole still looks peaceful from above. Clear water, tourists laughing, divers training. But down at the bottom, a metal grate sits over a hole in the rock, blocking a darkness that has already proven what it can do. And if you ever wondered what might happen if you bypassed it, just remember, the cave doesn't care how confident you feel. It only cares about physics. If this story got under your skin, comment, "The Great." It helps the video reach more people. And if you want more real-life horror like this, please like, share, comment, and subscribe to Scary Stories Files. Because the scariest places don't chase you, they wait.